What's going on, guys? For part 3 of this Les Paul repair, I'm going to show you how I repaired the neck. I put 6 splines in here plus a back strap to, number one, fix all the cracks that had Bondo embedded in there and actually add some strength to this, and then used a piece of wood to cover up where I had huge chunks of stuff missing. I'm still gonna have to use a little bit of filler on the sides, but for the most part I can now hide this relatively easily since I've got this widow's peak running. I didn't change the carve of the neck too much, and each spline that I put in here had sort of a different reason. The first one I did was to fix the crack that was running off this way, and then the second one was to add strength. Same thing with the third. And then the 4th, 5th, and 6th were because of cracks I could see starting to develop as I was working on this. Now this thing is really, really strong. I can feel it. I mean, I'm cranking on it and I'm not even hearing it sort of move, which is a great sign. I may actually do one more strip right here. I've got a little bit of a chunk of wood missing, and I think I may run that through and get some of this Bondo off. But I'm gonna let this dry for a couple days and think about it. But let's get into the video and show you guys how I repaired this neck. So we're gonna use my Laguna bandsaw and a very skinny 1/4-inch blade. Tried to find the skinniest blade I could find. I'm gonna saw off the face of the headstock. This was terrifying because I thought I would hit the truss rod. I pushed the truss rod back as far as I could into the neck and just went slow, and I cut off a real small piece, about a 30-second slice, and it went pretty smooth, but a little bit scared. This was a little risky, but I got it off, and you can see the mess that I've got underneath that faceplate. The Bondo was a significant problem. So then after I cut, the headstock wasn't perfectly cut, so I've just got to sand some of the side down so that it's flat. The headstock had a little bit of a twist in it from the wood, and so this will get it flat. And then as I glue on the back strap and the new headstock plate, it'll be perfectly fine. But this is just cleaning it up to get it nice and level. So just checking out as I'm running it, just a 80 grit sandpaper on the back of the neck. So then we're going to build a custom jig to start inlaying new pieces of wood to replace the Bondo mess that I've got. So this is a jig I'm building, figure out how to strap this sucker down, put some wedge blocks along with the StewMac cork pad, and then I'll take this upstairs to my pin router and build a sled so that it goes through in the same direction. There's no side-to-side movement. So this is the neck on the jig, and then you can see the 2 pieces of board on the side of the pin router to just route out 1/4 inch. I'm going to route out that first piece of the neck that had the crack running on the inside. And I ended up putting like 7 splines in here. This was the first one. This was the crack that was new as I was gluing this up, so you could see the Bondo in the crack, which is terrible. So then we'll just start creating a bunch of wedges here with mahogany. I didn't want to use maple or another wood. I wanted to use mahogany, so this is a genuine piece of mahogany. We'll cut a bunch of 1/4 inch strips. We'll sand the curve of the router bit so it's 1/4 inch. Make sure it fits tight. Not too tight because you don't want to squeeze it out, all the glue out. We'll get some yellow glue, apply it on the bottom, take some pictures for the Insta, and for the owner, show them what I'm working on. We'll get a Q-tip and make sure the glue is on both surfaces. And then as I push this in, make sure it sits right. Clean off that surfaces with the glue. I don't want the glue to linger. Clamp it down. And clean off the glue. So I think I'll put one more clamp on here as well. Get a little water to wash off some of the glue. Don't need the glue buildup here. So this first spline was a 1/4 inch. We'll do some 1/8 inch, and then we'll even do a 9mm one, because as I was running this through, one of the times the bit slipped slightly. So here's the glue and the clamp. And we do this one on the neck first, because then we'll cut it, trim it, and then drop this onto my rail machine. So we trim the excess off, and then I've got this rail machine that slides back and forth here, that now I can run all of the different splines to replace all the cracked pieces of wood. Use this in a couple different videos, and if I lean this out over the table, I've got the neck perfectly in the right spot and can just run this and glue in the 7 or 8 different splines. The trick here is to go slow, so we're going about an 1/8 inch down each pass. And on these rails, nothing moves, and it's really solid. This was a great tool I bought, or made, to keep everything smooth. I use this tool for inlaying truss rods and graphite rods that I insert into the neck. So just going slow back and forth. This is a Craftsman router with that 1/4 inch bit, and where each sort of crack in the neck was that had some Bondo, this is going to put in new mahogany to replace that. And so I've got some screws holding this down with some wood through the tuner holes, and I'm making sure just to go slow and get this right. So we cut another spleen upstairs on the bandsaw, again using some Titebond glue. The first crack was the sort of most significant crack. This and the second one are where I've got the most issues in terms of being closest to the truss rod cutout. So again, we'll get the Q-tip and wipe the glue on. Make sure it gets all over the spleen, piece of wood, whatever you want to call it. You don't want that glue to all sit on the bottom. After I glued on the headstock, I could tell it still wasn't all that solid, so I knew I had to put all these spleens in. So here's the cork line Stumac pad and some clamps. Put the first one on, and then didn't realize this would be a pain to clamp up. So I had to clamp on the cork pad and then clamp on the backing to have a little bit more clamping pressure. So we'll let this sit. Like I said, these first two sort of spleens are the most important. So making sure I keep this clean and keep a lot of this glue out of everything is important. So then here's the second spleen, and I've got my camera looking at me so you can kind of see how I'm doing this. This is a little bit of a bigger bit. This is the 9mm bit. You just go down each time slowly. Definitely hard to see. But here's how it's all set up. That was probably the most important crack to fix. So I went a little bit higher into the headstock. So we just run that spleen on a piece of wood, get that curve right, drop in some more glue. Get the glue to spread out again. And after each time I glue in a spleen, I trim it down before I glue in the next one. You can see I'm pushing out a lot of glue here. We'll clean that up. And then after I've run the first 5, I've got a little carving knife and a hand plane, finger plane, and we'll just clean this up to get it all level. And then for the one spleen that's on the outside, we'll sand this down on my rigid oscillating spindle sander. This is the only one that is really visible from the front, but it's also the one that needed a little bit more work because of where the wood cracked. So I'm going to get a file and file down that side to get it flat. Just a round rasp. And then again, I got that block with the sandpaper and making sure everything's smooth. I didn't want to run the spleens through the back because then you would see it. Even with the wood drying and the paint drying over time, you would see the spleens, which I didn't like. So we're going to put a back strap on towards the end of this that you'll see that'll cover up where that wood is missing on the back. And we'll get like that widow's peak and feather in the different stain to get this to disappear so you don't see it. And I really didn't want to change the feel of the neck. So then here we're going to sand all the different cracks, or all the spleens to get them flat where the cracks were. And then I needed the StewMac truss rod repair, I guess, tool is what I would call it. I'm not going to put the same big sort of wedge, steel wedge that goes against this, because I still need that piece of wood. So we're just going to use this, I guess it's like a chisel with a hole in the middle to repair the truss rod, where if your truss rod breaks, you can use this tool to get a little bit more of the rod back. And I just need to use this tool to make sure that I can get my screwdriver in here, which is going to be the new truss rod adjustment. So you can see all the different wood spleens floating in there. I also use a Narex chisel to clean out the sides just slightly. I don't need as much room as before, but I needed to make sure that I could get the tool in there and that it was clean. So I've got, I think it's a 9mm chisel here, and I'm just slowly cleaning out the mahogany from the new splines. I don't want to take too much out, so the hole will be slightly smaller than before, but I've got a different tool then to adjust the truss rod. And so the truss rod opening is just slightly different, but it's for a good cause. So that's the adjustment tool that I'll give back to the owner. And that's the sacrifice I had to make here, is that I can't get it to the exact same space and shape because I've got all of those mahogany spleens running through this. So just want to make sure it's looking right. And carving mahogany is really easy. so you can see what it's looking like. And a sharp chisel and mahogany is like butter. So then on the back side, I have to drill out with a 3/8 inch bit, figure out the right size, where I ran one spleen up through the holes. So I'm just going to actually not use the drill forward, I'm going to use it backwards and just sort of enlarge those holes slightly, running this at reverse speed, not forward speed, because then I'd get just to tear it out. So I'm just sort of smashing it from the backside versus drilling it back out. And then here we'll test the washer that I'm going to use and the new truss rod adjustment tool. So then this is the back strap that I'm going to place onto the back of the neck to hide where the missing mahogany is, and it'll also cover up a little bit of the bondo. So just a 30-second sized piece of wood. We're also going to repair the old screw holes because they were way too wide, and so I've got some toothpicks and a little bit of glue, and we're just going to glue this up and plug these holes. That way when I put a new screw in, it'll hold. I want to make sure I do this right. And then I've got a Narix chisel wide one, and I'm just sort of razor blading off the edge of the toothpick that was sticking up. Just scrape the bondo slightly, come back with that piece of wood, clamp it down on a little bit of a board so that everything's flat. And I've got some deep reach clamps here that will clamp all this together. A couple clamps, get it nice and flat. Make sure the glue is cleaned off again. We let this dry for a couple of days actually, and then we trim the wood. And filming with GoPro is a little hard sometimes because on this saw I can't get the cut. So after we trimmed it, we went right to sanding it. So I sanded it so that it was just flush. You just want to take off a little bit of the edge just till you get up to it. You don't want to sand too much. So we'll do this on the sides and the top of the headstock. And then what I did is I took it over to the table and I got one of my carving knives and just slowly carved all the stuff that wasn't glued down. Get it flat. And then I took my couple sanding tools here and sanded it as well. The trick with doing the sides is that you don't want to get some run out and pull the grain off, so you want to sort of cut towards you and then cut away from you. So on the bottom, cut towards you, and on the top of the headstock, cut away from you, and that way you shouldn't get the wood to tear out. And then I just sanded this down with, I think this is a 120 grit piece of sandpaper on a one of the rigid sanding spindles, and just sort of fine tune it a little bit. I know you lose the color of the wings, but it's the best I can do. I will throw this in the light box in a separate video to show how I darken this up and get the wood to match a little bit better. But here is the final fix at this stage. Thanks for watching, guys. We will see you in the next video.